Welcome. So we're here to talk about Cyber Lantern today and what we're doing for compliance and security for local government and the SMB space. So if you just give me a second here, I'm going to share out my screen. No, so we haven't started yet. So we're going to get started right now. And just let me know if you guys can see my screen. And Dwayne, can you still see this and hear me? All right. All right. Thank you. So let's just jump right in. Tell you a little bit about Cyber Lantern. So Cyber Lantern is actually a SaaS platform that has been brought together by yes.
Are you going to do a demo at some point too, so everybody knows that you'll do a demo, or how's that going to work?
Yes. So I'm going to go through a quick presentation here, and then I'm going to jump into a demo so that you guys can actually see the platform working. Just wanted to give some background on us and what it is that we're doing and some of the use cases that we've been working with local governments and small to mid-sized businesses. So our team actually comes out of the Department of Defense space. We've been working with massive cyber operations, big data technologies, and our team has actually built a majority of the cyber platforms that are utilized today within the Department of Defense. And as we have entered into the commercial space, we've had a lot of activities occurring around ransomware lately, especially with local government, small to mid-sized businesses. This has become even more, prominent in the last 2 or 3 years since we've had COVID and everyone has been having to work more remotely. So what we're identifying now is that there is a huge rise in ransomware in the local government and local small business space. So in the last 5 or 6 years, we've actually seen about 400 attacks for city, county governments. Small businesses are not included in here, but that's a massive amount of attacks just in the small, in the local government space. Some of the impacts that these organizations are seeing are loss of valuable data, business disruptions. And the funny thing here is that a lot of these local governments, they, the ransomware payment was actually pretty low, in the tens of thousands of dollars. But of course, they're trying to not pay these out because that just encourages more of these hackers to continue to attack them. And so instead, the repercussion is that now they have to rebuild all of their environments and bring everything back up and running. And it's costing them multiple millions of dollars. A lot of these cities and local governments are, coming offline, not being able to submit payment processes. So they're losing money. They're being held liable for not being compliant. And it's taking a real toll on them. So what does a small business or, a local government do in this situation? They're already faced with tons of obstacles around, limited resources and budgets, compliance, work from home situations. And all of the solutions that are available to them are, they're quite complicated or difficult to implement. Takes a long time for them to get everything up and running. And so what we really wanted to do is provide these organizations and local governments with the ability to basically have one location where they can get compliant and stay secure. So we're doing this through our Cyber Lantern SaaS compliance and security platform. The benefits here for the local governments and small businesses is that we're really focusing on making this very cost effective. There's no build or stack management on your end. There's no data limits. We're remaining absolutely flexible on what vendors we work with. So whatever tools and security products you already have deployed, we want to make sure that we're integrating them for you and giving you the best return on investment on your current purchases versus telling you, that you have to install one of our agents or you have to install a specific type of EDR or firewall. And then last, you get the expertise from our, NSA and military cyber operations team that is able to basically bring up any customer, within a few days of onboarding. So the process here is that, we want to keep it very frictionless for the customer. Initially, we're going to go in and we're going to do an assessment of the security posture. This is actually in alignment today with several different compliance standards, and we'll show you that here in a second. Once we've identified where the gaps are, then we can start to identify what needs to be done from a milestone perspective to actually maintain the security and get your systems more secure and get you up to that compliance level that you've desired. And then we can implement the 24/7 security operations, which helps you get closer to your compliance because you're adopting all of our security processes and procedures and technologies. So the first piece to this is the Cyber Lantern compliance. As I mentioned, we're using our proprietary CISO logic. So we worked with the ex-CISO of the state of California. He actually had these massive spreadsheets that he was working with to identify risk within the environments, not only at the state, but then also at some of the local counties. And we said, you know what, hey, why don't we take all of these calculations that were both quantitative and qualitative and automate them so that we can get through this process a lot faster. So typically, this would take him about 3 to 4 weeks to get done from start to finish. And now with our platform, you can get this done within a few hours for your first assessment to understand where you're at and what changes you need to make. Then once we do that, we implement the Cyber Lantern security side of the house. And here what we're doing is we're really working with all of the telemetry data that's coming out of your environment. We've developed a rapid and automated log ingest so that we can quickly take in new data sets. So everything from your cloud to your endpoint, identity and access management, vulnerability management goes into our system. We then enrich it. We apply our own machine learning analytics, and we cross-correlate all of that data. So now all of that alert fatigue that you would typically get from your daily standard operating procedures, we're really going to minimize that by really only producing reports on things that are important to your business and that we've identified as being a true positive. One of our use cases here is actually one of the counties in California. That's one of our customers. So you can see here over time how we've actually decreased the number of events and incidents, not only that we're investigating, but also configuration errors. So as I mentioned, on top of doing, the typical day-to-day SOC operations, we're also using advanced analytics beyond the security tools that are available to you, providing a better return on investment on the tools that you do have deployed, and then doing the continuous compliance monitoring for them. So what you can see here is that initially when we started with this customer the first 2 months, we had a higher level of false positive rates as we were tuning the engines. And then you can see that it exponentially decreases over time to now only having maybe about 1 or 2 false positives a month. But an interesting thing here that we see too is that we're identifying configuration errors on top of just security incidents, right? So again, you can see where, initially we had tons of configuration errors that we were producing for them. And then over time, their configuration errors have gone down. And what ends up happening here now is that because we're reducing the configuration errors, we're fine-tuning the systems to true positives. We're also seeing the number of events going down significantly because now we don't have as many configuration errors and as many false positives to deal with. So I'm going to switch over to a demo. So as I mentioned, what we're looking at here is both the compliance and protection mechanisms. So the first thing we want to do when we onboard a customer is understand where they are from a compliance standard perspective. Some of our customers have specific compliance mandates that they have to meet. Today, we actually cover CMMC, NIST cybersecurity framework, SOC 2, and high trust compliance standards. So we will initially come in and ask our customers to identify what compliance level do you think you want to be at, or what compliance level do you need to be at based on the specific standard that we're operating with. And this will vary. Sometimes customers have specific compliance standards that they have to meet. If not, then what we do is we try to match up the standard or the level of compliance based on the maturity of the organization, how big they are, and how quickly they intend to scale. So we take the approach of looking at policies, practices, and technology with the compliance standards. So those are the three areas that we're going to focus on for all of the different control mappings. So now, instead of me going in here and having to, answer 160 different control mapping questions, like you typically would through an audit process or an assessment process, we're really going to overly simplify this for the customer set. So we have all of the different technologies that you would need for your specific compliance standard. All of this is mapped on our back end. So just depending on what level of compliance and what type of compliance you want will depend on what standard and mapping we have for you. So in this case, you can see that we match industry standards for each one of the technology levels. So as a customer is identifying what type of technologies they have, this will actually affect their score. And for those that don't understand the different types of technologies, we have some examples here so that they can have a better understanding of what exactly we mean from a technology perspective. Now, I say this, that our customers can go in here and look at this, but we also do offer guided assessments. And typically the first assessment we do with a customer, we will make it guided just to give an understanding of how the actual platform works and how to answer the questions more efficiently. Second to that, we'll actually allow our customers to upload their policies. So typically when you're going through an assessment for a compliance, you're going to have to provide your policies to someone and they're going to manually read them. We've actually developed a policy engine that allows you to upload your policies either individually by the type of policy or in a bulk file. And what it does is it uses natural language processing to actually score your policies based on gold standard policies that we've ingested into the system. So now you're not only going to get a score for your policy, but our system will actually identify where your gaps are by specific control areas within that policy. Additionally to this, we're not just going to give you the ability to upload policies, but we can also put in quantitative data here. So if you have scans from Nessus, AWS, Azure, or SafeBreach. SafeBreach is actually one of our partner organizations. So we're able to provide our customers with SafeBreach scans as a part of our packages. And what this does is it shows us not only from a policy and a technology perspective, but now also from a practice perspective, what your organization is actually susceptible to. So once we've uploaded all of this information, and again, this takes maybe within, an hour or two initially, we have an overview of all of the different areas with scores. So I can go in here, I can take a look at what my overviews are. I can go in and actually modify some of the responses, just depending on whether, I feel the scores are appropriately matched or not. And the beauty here is that the system over time will actually learn with the modifications of the score to make sure that it's tweaking the scores to more appropriately identify the proper numbers based on actual input from the auditors and assessors who may be helping you through the process. And last but not least, when you start to look at the summary here, you see all of the scores, but now you can actually see where your specific gaps are as well. So you can see that this number here, the initial assessment for this customer was quite low. They were missing tons of policies, obviously. So you can see based off of their target score, they didn't have any policies in place at this point in time. They were also lacking in some areas for technology. So now they have a good baseline of what it is they need to go and fix or start to work on from a plan of actions and milestones perspective. So if I, go into this now and start to look at some of the higher scored ones, you can see where the customer actually went in and updated their technologies. Before they didn't have an endpoint or a firewall, now they do. And so this not only ups all of their scores, and they also added they added more policies in here as well. So now this not only ups their score, but it gives them a whole new list of plans of action and milestones, right? And so our goal here is to not just tell you, hey, you need to change this or you need to change that, but actually give you some actionable areas as well. So for example, if we said you need to update your security policy or you need to add one, we're providing you with all of the templates for each one of those actual policies that you may need, so that now you can easily implement the policies. And you also have a good baseline out of these policies, right, of what changes you should be making from a security perspective. So over time now you can implement the different components of the policies. You upload your policies and now they are more up to date. And then last, when you're going through that actual audit process, we now also have all of your evidence co-located in one space so that you can access all of the evidence for your audits in one place with the auditor. So now that we've gotten a good temperature check on where we are from a compliance standard, we can now start to implement our security operations and protection. And this is where the beauty comes into play, because now when we start to add in the data from your actual environment, whether it be firewall data, vulnerability scan information, new alerts, that are coming from endpoint detection devices, this will actually over time modify or keep your maturity and compliance score updated automatically. So what does that mean? With our interface, we're going to help provide you information about what assets are currently logged into your system. We give our customers the ability to actually identify criticality of those specific assets. So again, this could be something that the customer comes in here and does, or we can work with them through our security operations center to actually update this. And what this does is it actually gives our analysts an understanding of what are the most critical components of this environment. And the results of this will actually tweak what types of tasks are being prioritized and what alerts are being prioritized for any specific customer. Second, we're going to look at all of the vulnerabilities in the environment. So again, this is a great example of how your maturity score changes over time to make sure that you're practicing what you preach. So if you tell me that you have a vulnerability management practice in place, or you have vulnerability management in place, and now I see a high volume of high severity vulnerabilities in here that are not being addressed, that's going to automatically affect your maturity score and your risk score over time. And you'll be able to see that within the environment itself, that your risk score is actually higher or lower than it's supposed to be. And then last, we're taking all of this data that we're aggregating, right, from your endpoints, from your firewalls, from all of the different devices within your network, all of the data sets that you're providing to us for the Security Operations Center. We do have this as a SIM as a service. So that is actually a part of the offering through the CyberLantern and Protect. So we will aggregate all of the data from all of the different locations, all of the different products that you have deployed. And then we will run our own enrichment and analytics on top of that as described. So on top of just getting, the alerts off of the system, we're cross-correlating that with bad lists that we have ingested, with specific analytics for the different data sets, whether it be, suspicious DNS, different types of connections at odd hours, large amounts of failed logins. And what that allows us to do now, instead of looking at a high volume of alerts that are coming off of one customer's environment, so you can see here, this customer has about 1,300 alerts. We're really only looking at 4 prioritized tasks that our analysts need to hyper focus on. And that's happening because we do all of that cross correlation and data analytics on the back end. So our analysts can now go in here, they can upvote these or downvote these. And this helps to play into what's most important for this specific customer, depending on what their business operations are and what's most crucial to them based on their critical nodes. On top of that here, we actually give our customers the ability to create tickets so that we can automatically go look at these events. Our analysts can also come in here and create tickets automatically. We have the ability to connect to different types of environments to provide some SOAR capabilities around quarantining and unquarantining specific systems. And then we also provide additional information associated with external threat feeds for more contextual data on a specific alert. And then last but not least, we'll talk a little bit about our supply chain here. So obviously, when we're dealing with small businesses or we're dealing with local governments, there's typically sub-organizations that they want to prioritize in understanding what their risk and compliance level are. So for example, with a specific government customer or a county, it may be very important not only for them to have security operations around their own environment, but also understanding what all of the sub-organizations, whether it be the Veterans Affairs or the library or the Sheriff's Department, how they're doing from a risk and maturity score perspective. So what we've done is we've actually created a login to give them the ability to have their sub-organizations or supply chains registered directly with us. And then what they will be provided is basically these scorecards for each one of the individual sub-organizations. So we're not necessarily telling them, hey, we're not giving them insight into the direct data of this customer, but we are giving them a high level overview of the risk as it's increasing or decreasing. So a great example of that is we actually provide our own risk and compliance scoring to our customers as part of it because we are a part of the supply chain. And so now they can actually see how we're scoring overall from a compliance standard, and then also over time what our risk is as it's going up and down. So now if there's specific thresholds that are met either from a high risk perspective or a low compliance maturity score perspective, that organization can understand what the risk level is of their supply chain. So I'm gonna stop here and open it up to any questions that you guys may have on the call. If there aren't any questions, what I'll do is I'll just go through the process real quick of what's the onboarding process with our team, just so you have an understanding of how quickly we are onboarding and what the process is for that. So our onboarding process is actually very quick. We aim to get this complete and get you an initial compliance check and POAM or plan of action and milestone within the first day. So what we'll do is we'll actually run through that compliance standard that I just showed you on the first day or on our initial call. This typically takes one day, as I mentioned, assuming we have all the policies lined up and ready to go. And a lot of our customers don't have all of the policies they need initially. So once we go through that initial standard and identify a plan of action and milestone, we can then start to run any kind of scans or assessments. This is where the Nessa scans and attack simulations would come into play if you don't already have those done for your environment. Once we do those within a 2 or 3 day period, which is basically just the amount of time that the scans take to run, then we can actually look at all of the results and start the data onboarding process. Now, depending on what type of data you have, and again, the involvement of your team, this can take anywhere between 2 to 3 days. But basically, you can see here within a 1 week period, we can then begin 24/7 continuous monitoring. And now this is where we start to fine tune our operations, look through your data, filter out the noise, and really get to a point where we're tuning the environment. And within a 1 month timeline, we typically reduce to about a 10% false positive rate. So we're not bombarding you with tons of alerts and tons of false positives, but really making sure that any incidents or investigations that we initiate are meaningful to your organization. Okay, you have a question, go ahead. How do you ingest data from log sources without an agent, since this is a SaaS solution? Dwayne, do you want to take that question?
Yeah. The basic way that we do it in all kinds of different ways, but let's assume, for instance, you have an Amazon, an Azure, and then an on-prem solution. We basically get the keys from AWS, the encryption keys from AWS and Azure, and we can then start aggregating and pulling that log data from there into our VPC. If you're on a hybrid system, you already have CrowdStrike, you already have Palo Alto, you already have IS as servers. We'll take your syslog, WinLog, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto data from your on-prem, encrypt it, and pull it into our environment for correlation and fusion. And so we take what's already being produced out of the environment. If the customer does not have a, say, an endpoint detection device or something like that, we have an integration with Tanium, with CrowdStrike, with Darktrace, Nessus, and a whole bunch of other vendors, so that we can help integrate something like that at a cost-effective in a cost-effective way.
Any other questions? And I'm going to share my email here in case you want to follow up with us. Okay, so the licensing model. We can do a monthly licensing, or we can do an annual licensing of the platform. And then, of course, you have the option of breaking it down in just doing the Cyber Lantern compliance piece if you really just want access to the compliance components of the platform, or we can do a bundle offer for the compliance and security, or you can just have the security operations piece instead of having both as well. So we make it very, very flexible for you. The entire scenario basically costs you less than the price of having one analyst on board. So we make it very affordable. And the pricing model, yes.
Why don't you make sure they understand this is subscription based? In other words, we are running your entire SOC operations. We're doing all the heavy lifting. So we're not selling a platform or a SaaS platform to you necessarily, but we're running it as a SaaS platform, more as like a subscription, monthly or annual subscription model. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yes, thank you. Does that answer your question? And we can also we can always have some additional discussions if you email me. I put my email in there. It's mdeniston@cyberlantern.com. We can absolutely have a secondary discussion about pricing and show you all of the different pricing models that we can provide. Yes, so it is a SOC as a service, but it's also a compliance as a service as well, I guess. So you can utilize just the compliance piece of the platform. You don't necessarily need to subscribe to the SOC side of the house. And typically, like I said, we'll do a first guided assessment. But we do offer compliance within the platform, SOC as a service, and then SIM as a service as part of the package.
Yeah, and the value of having them both together is what we're trying to do is get the customer as quickly and easily to an audit place. And so what we basically do by having the data in the same environment as the compliance piece, we can validate all the practices that they said they did in policy or in controls. And so we're able to update that maturity score based upon real world practices around their ability to protect and defend their infrastructure. And so having these two together is the protection gets you about 53% compliant in most compliance standards. And being compliant gives you fewer false positives at the beginning because you know the environment. So they work together. A lot of folks have these as separate budget line items, and we've combined them both at a lower cost than any single assessment or any single SOC as a service for 24/7 service. And that's our goal, is to provide the stuff enterprise level at a price point that organizations can take advantage of.
Yeah, and to answer your question, what security attestations do we have today? So today we're covering CMMC, We're covering SOC 2. We have the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 853, revision 4, and I think we're working on revision 5.
Yeah, we have 5. We have ISO 27001 and 27002. And we're working also on SCF right now. So our goal is to allow this environment to capture the information needed to be able to validate those compliance standards, and then have that done automatically within the system, so that you're not trying to figure out all those different standards.
Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, like I said, you can feel free to email us. You can email me directly at mdeniston@cyberlantern.com, and we'd be happy to give you a more in-depth demo, as well as have a discussion around pricing and how we could help with the compliance standard and requirements that you may have.